We would have never seen him. My partner busted you. When we pulled up, I was in the front seat. Happened to see my friend, Shug.
Shug looks over, he sees you.
Yeah.
He looks right at you.
You said the shots came from the back. Big Dre, Orlando. Who shot Tupac?
To keep it for the code of the streets. It just came from the backseat.
The man who is now charged with the murder confessed in 2008 that he was involved and has been saying it very openly in interviews that he handed the gun to a guy named Orlando Anderson, his nephew. And Keefe's story is that Orlando pulled the trigger and fired the shots into the car, which Suge Knight was driving. Tupac was the passenger.
I believe Big and Tupac was in-house. All had something to do with death row people.
Just when everyone thought the Tupac case was long gone and buried, boom, the feds came back around and dropped a brand new arrest that turned the whole story upside down. This isn't some random move either. If Keef D was just the face taking the fall, this new arrest might point straight at the real boss pulling strings behind the scenes. Word is, he was out here protecting a name the prosecutor's been keeping locked in the shadows for months. But when that name finally drops, it's gonna shake the whole game. The street's already buzzing crazy.
It's blasting. You say Shug looks over, he sees you.
Yeah.
He looks right at you.
Yeah, he looked at me.
When he looks over at you, and then, Tupac's busy getting shot. Evidently, the story is Tupac's trying to either get out
in
of
the back seat or something.
Yeah, what do you see happening inside of their car?
I seen a bullet going Shug's head. I thought he was dead.
There's talk everywhere that a shocking arrest just hit out of nowhere in Tupac's murder case. It's like the cops been sitting on a secret bomb for nearly 30 years, waiting for the perfect moment to drop it. And let's be real, this ain't some online rumor or fan theory. This is real life, real arrest, real cuffs, real pressure. The second that news broke, everyone's eyes went straight to one person, Keef D. Yeah, the same dude who's already behind bars, already talking and waiting for his big court showdown. But if this new arrest lines up the way insiders are whispering, Keef's whole story might finally fall apart. And here's what a lot of people forget. There were 4 people in that white Cadillac the night the shots went off on September 7th, 1996. 4 people who know exactly what went down that night. Out of the 4 guys in that white Cadillac, 3, Orlando Anderson, DeAndre Big Dre Smith, and Terrence Bubble Up Brown, are all gone now. That leaves Keef D as the only one still alive who really knows what went down that night. But just because he's the last man standing doesn't mean the heat stops there. Prosecutors just dropped some wild info. They got evidence from a 2006 interview with another gang member who straight up linked Davis to the murder. This dude gave his story before Keef ever started talking in public. That means there's at least one more person out there who's been knowing the truth for years, and he already told the police about it way back.
I believe Big and Tupac was in-house. All had something to do with death row people.
But the real bombshell, it's who might have been pulling the strings from behind the curtain. Keef D himself is now pointing fingers at Reggie Wright Jr., the former head of security for Death Row Records, and that's just scratching the surface of what might have been going on behind the scenes that night. While the media keeps their cameras locked on Keef D sitting in that Clark County detention center, the streets are asking the real questions. Who else knew this was about to happen? Who else should have been cuffed up? And why did it take 27 years for anyone to finally face justice when so many people clearly knew the truth all along? Now let's break down how we even got to this wild point. On September 29th, 2023, Las Vegas Metro finally pulled up on Dwayne Keef D. Davis.
So what happens next?
And we just came, and I ain't gonna go into details like that, you know what I'm saying? But, you got it in a book. You done played it, everything else, you know what I'm saying?
And hit him with a murder charge for Tupac Shakur's death. But don't get it twisted. This wasn't some magical cold case moment where detectives suddenly found DNA or a lost weapon. No way. This arrest went down because Keef D just couldn't keep quiet for years. And when I say years, I mean decades. This man's been everywhere. Interviews, documentaries, podcasts. If there was a camera and a mic, he was there spilling stories. He even dropped a book called Compton Street Legend, breaking down his street life and flat out talking about what went down with Pac. He sat across from cops, producers, and reporters like he's reliving the whole thing. At one point, he literally became the go-to guy for every single documentary about unsolved hip-hop murders. And in every single one of those moments, he kept saying the same thing. He was inside that white Cadillac when Tupac got shot. Like, who does that? Why would anyone go public about being part of one of the most famous murders in music history? Turns out, Keith thought he was untouchable. Back in 2008 and 2009, when LAPD was digging into Biggie's murder, they brought him in under what's called a proffer agreement. Basically, that's a deal where you can spill everything to the police, talk about crimes, name names, and those words can't legally be used against you. Keith thought he was protected forever.
Well, I did a deal with the U.S. attorneys and U.S. attorney, and the dude was from D.C., Justice Department. You know what I'm saying? I was like, you came out here? He like, yeah, I came out here to get you.
But that deal didn't stretch as far as he believed. Keith D really thought that his so-called immunity covered everything he ever said about Tupac's murder, no matter where he said it. But he was completely wrong. Those proffer deals only protect what's said inside those official law enforcement meetings. That's it. They don't give you a lifelong pass to hop on every podcast, every YouTube channel, and brag about being tied to a murder. And they definitely don't protect you when you start cashing in, writing books, getting paid for interviews, and turning confessions into paychecks. But let's rewind to the night that changed hip-hop forever. Because to really get why Keith D's arrest is such a big deal, you gotta understand what went down that night. September 7th, 1996, Tupac and Suge Knight had just left the Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand in Vegas. In the casino lobby, Pac and the death row crew caught Orlando Anderson slipping, the same Southside Compton Crip who had tried to snatch a death row chain just a few weeks before, and the beatdown went down right there in front of cameras. The whole thing caught on tape. After that fight, Pac and Suge jumped in Suge's black BMW heading out toward Club 662, but around 11:15 p.m., they hit a red light on Flamingo Road in Colville Lane, and that's when everything changed. A white Cadillac rolled up on the passenger side, right where Pac was sitting. In just a few seconds, the night exploded into chaos, and the entire world of hip-hop would never be the same again. Yeah, at least 13 shots ripped through the air that night. Tupac took 4 of them. One tore through his lung, another hit his pelvis, and the rest struck his hand and thigh. Suge caught some shrapnel but managed to survive. Then, just 6 days later, on September 13th, Tupac Shakur was gone, only 25 years old, gone way too soon, and the world's been asking questions ever since. Here's where it gets even darker. Keith D straight up admits he was sitting in the front passenger seat of that white Cadillac. He says the gun came from the back seat, right where his nephew Orlando and Big Dre was sitting. But when it comes to who actually pulled that trigger, he suddenly switches up, gets all quiet, and plays it vague, like he's protecting somebody. For 27 long years, the whole case just sat cold, frozen in time. Orlando Anderson got questioned back then but never charged, and 2 years later, he was killed in a Compton shootout. Big Dre, gone. Bubble Up, gone too. Every single person who could have backed up or challenged Keith's story was wiped out, leaving him as the only voice left standing, the last man still talking. And while Keith D was out here turning his story into fame and money, Las Vegas prosecutors were sitting in the background, watching every move, every interview, every word, slowly building a case that would come back to haunt him big time. On July 17th, 2023, the cops hit Keith D's Henderson, Nevada home with a full-on search warrant, and what they found blew the lid off everything. They uncovered documents, materials, and notes that lined up perfectly with the wild stories Keith had been bragging about for years. 2 months later, the hammer dropped. He was arrested. But here's the thing, this might not be the final chapter at all. See, people who were close to the case, folks who were actually around that night, are coming forward saying Keith D's version just doesn't line up. And that changes everything. Because if insiders from Death Row Records were really involved in Pac's murder, then that whole gang retaliation story the world's been told for decades starts to fall apart. Suddenly that fight at the MGM looks less like random street beef and more like a setup. A cover-up for something cold and calculated. What if Keith D and his crew were just pawns in somebody else's game? Maybe they were being used. Or maybe they just happened to be in the right spot while the real masterminds made sure Pac was exposed and unprotected that night. How did they know Pac's moves so precisely? How did they know what route he'd take or exactly where he'd be stopped at a red light on Flamingo and Colville? That's way too perfect to be random. The official story claims it was pure luck, that they were just cruising around looking for death row members and happened to spot Pac by chance. But come on, a lot of people in the streets aren't buying that for a second. Something about that night feels way too planned, way too clean, and this arrest might just be scratching the surface of what really went down. Way too many coincidences, too perfect of timing, and way too many people with motives that had nothing to do with some street-level gang beef, which brings us right back to the real question. Who else was involved? Because think about it. Prosecutors went after Keith D even though he admits he wasn't the one pulling the trigger. But since he was part of the crew that carried it out, the law says he's just as guilty.
Coming up from Mingo and got to the light. He was supposed to go drink and smoke some weed, and he happened to be hanging out the window. He's hanging out the window like he was in a parade.
Tupac.
Yeah, he was.
But if that rule applies to him, shouldn't it hit everyone else who might have played a role too? What about the person who handed over the gun, or the ones who told them exactly where Pac would be that night? And what about the people inside death row, the ones witnesses claim were celebrating when the news broke that Pac was gone? That's the talk heating up the streets right now. Because let's be real, this wasn't just some random setup by a few street soldiers. Bigger players were moving behind the scenes, people with serious power, heavy influence, and a lot to lose if the full truth ever got out. And now, with Keith D sitting behind bars as the only one facing charges, it's got everyone wondering why the real power players still walk free. And the courtroom drama, it's been wild. When Keith D got booked and arraigned for first-degree murder, everyone thought he'd chill. Stay quiet, let his lawyers handle business, and play it smart. But that's not how this man rolls. From the very first court appearance, Keith's been acting like he's filming his own documentary, grinning, talking, and carrying himself like the cameras are there for him. And what's been unfolding inside that courtroom has shown just how tangled this whole case really is. Every new hearing, every new motion, it's clear this story's way bigger than just one man, and the deeper it goes, the messier it gets. The first big bomb his defense team dropped in court was all about that so-called immunity. Keith D's lawyers came out swinging, claiming that everything their client ever said, from his interviews to his book, to every wild story he told on camera, should be protected under the proffer deal he made with cops back in 2008 and 2009. That's when law enforcement questioned him about Biggie's murder, and during those talks, he also brought up Tupac's case. His attorneys argued that since multiple agencies, LAPD, Las Vegas PD, even federal agents all knew what Keith was saying back then, that meant he was automatically granted immunity for his role in Tupac's death too. They tried to paint it like the man was legally untouchable, no matter how many times he told the story. But the prosecution wasn't buying any of that. They came in hard, saying even if Keith had some limited immunity for specific conversations during those official interviews, that protection doesn't give him the right to hop on every podcast and YouTube show, publicly confessing to being part of a murder. That's not how the law works. And the prosecution didn't stop there. They brought up the money. They reminded the court that Keith wasn't just talking, he was profiting. He'd been selling books, collecting checks for documentaries, and turning his so-called truth into a money-making hustle. Under Nevada law, you can't profit off your crimes, period. So the fact that Keith was out here making cash off confessions about Tupac's murder, the prosecutor said that showed one thing loud and clear: consciousness of guilt. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was cashing in on it every step of the way. The judge wasn't playing around, and from the look of it, she sided with the prosecution. Every single motion Keith D's team filed to get the case tossed because of those immunity claims got shut down, denied. The case kept rolling forward, and the tension inside that courtroom only got heavier. During one fiery bail hearing, things really blew up. Keith D couldn't hold his tongue. He started speaking out of turn, visibly angry about the way prosecutors were painting him and his family. You could see it in his face. He was heated. What really set him off were the stacks of evidence the prosecution brought up, boxes filled with documents, old interviews, and transcripts from the original investigations. Then came the bombshell. The prosecution revealed they had a 2006 interview with another gang member who already implicated Keith D in Tupac's murder long before Keith ever started talking publicly. That detail hit hard because it proved something major. Law enforcement had dirt on him that didn't come from his own mouth. This wasn't just about what he confessed years later. There were people talking about him way before that. And when it came to bail, things got even more tense. The judge straight up said she was worried about Keith D trying to cash in on his fame if he got released. On top of that, she wanted answers. Who was actually putting up that bail money? Was it clean, legit cash, or were outside players using this case to push their own agendas?
Actually see a gun?
No, once he got the region, I got the ducking.
So someone from your car
That's what happened.
started shooting at Tupac and Suge.
But just when everyone thought they'd seen it all, that's when the situation took a wild turn. Something unexpected was about to shift the whole energy in that courtroom. Keith D's defense attorney dropped an argument that instantly got people buzzing. And not just in the courtroom. They pointed out that technically under Nevada law, there's nothing stopping someone from making money off their own story until they're officially convicted. Yeah, you heard that right. So Keith D's team argued that he had every right to keep making money from his story, at least until a jury said he was guilty. Wild, right? That created one of the strangest situations ever. a man charged with one of hip-hop's most infamous murders, possibly collecting checks for talking about the very crime he's accused of. It was like some twisted legal loop, a full-blown catch-22. The same interviews and stories that got him charged were now being used to make him money while he fought those same charges in court. Even legal experts were calling it one of the weirdest cases they'd seen in years. But the real explosion came when Keith D decided to flip the script and start naming names. In the middle of the courtroom, he began pointing fingers at other people he claimed should be investigated for their roles in hip-hop's darkest mysteries. And the name he dropped? Reggie Wright Jr. That's right, the former head of security for Death Row Records. Keith wasn't just tossing out random accusations either. He was making a direct comparison, saying if he was being held accountable for Tupac's murder, then Reggie Wright Jr. should be held accountable for Biggie's. Now, Reggie Wright Jr. has been surrounded by controversy for years. His name's been floating around both murder investigations, and not just because of his job at Death Row. He's also the son of Reggie Wright Sr., another figure with deep ties to law enforcement and the label. So when Keith D dropped that name in open court, the whole room shifted. Jaws dropped, cameras flashed, and whispers spread fast, because in that moment, it felt like the case had just cracked open a whole new level of drama. Reggie Wright Jr.'s father, Reggie Wright Sr., was a Compton police officer, a man sitting right in the middle of two worlds, the streets and law enforcement. That connection made things even murkier. Over the years, countless documentaries and deep dive investigations have questioned what he really knew, when he knew it, and whether he had any kind of role in either Tupac's or Biggie's murder. So when Keith D dropped those comments in court, it was clear he had two main goals. First, shift the heat off himself and throw some of that spotlight on others who he believed were just as guilty. And second, shake up the official story, hinting that this whole gang retaliation narrative the prosecutors keep pushing might not be the full truth. Was Keith D saying that people inside Death Row Records had their own reasons for wanting Pac gone? Was he hinting that the MGM beatdown and that fatal drive-by were part of a much deeper plan, something bigger than street beef? The way he framed it had everyone wondering if the real truth had been hiding behind industry power plays all along. As the case kept moving, it only got more complicated. The trial date kept getting pushed back over and over again. It was supposed to happen sooner, but now it's been officially postponed to February 2026. Keith D's defense team claimed they needed more time to interview key witnesses, dig through old evidence, and track down people connected to what they call decades-old allegations that could clear their client's name. Every delay just made the case feel bigger, deeper, and way more tangled than anyone imagined. Keith D's defense team claimed they had witnesses ready to take the stand, people who could place him somewhere else entirely the night Tupac was shot. They said they just needed more time to prep, to line everything up, and to make sure the jury heard every angle of their case. But while the defense was working on their side, the prosecution was loading up heavy too. They had receipts, a lot of them. Keith D's own words were front and center. His confessions, his book Compton Street Legend, his interviews, his documentary clips, all of it. Plus, they had evidence from that search warrant at his Nevada home, materials that backed up what he'd been bragging about in public. On top of that, they had multiple witness statements from people who were actually in Las Vegas that night, folks who could confirm parts of the timeline and the movements of everyone involved. And even though the forensic evidence was almost 30 years old, investigators said it still held key clues about what really went down under those Vegas lights. Here's where it gets real under Nevada law. You don't need to be the one pulling the trigger to catch a murder charge. It's called the felony murder rule. That means if you're part of the crew that carries out a crime and someone dies, everybody involved can be hit with first-degree murder. So even though Keith D's never flat out said he fired the gun, and he's always claimed the shots came from the back seat where his nephew Orlando and Big Dre were sitting, it doesn't matter. By admitting he was in that Cadillac, admitting he played a part, and admitting it was retaliation for what went down at the MGM Grand, he basically sealed his own fate. Once the news spread, the streets lit up. Social media went crazy. Every court update was being live tweeted, picked apart on YouTube, and debated non-stop across hip-hop forums. Everyone had an opinion. Half the people said Keith D was finally getting what he deserved after years of running his mouth and profiting off Pac's death. The other half swore he was being set up, just another fall guy in a much bigger story, taking the heat while the real masterminds behind Tupac's murder stayed hidden in plain sight. Now let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, because this is where things start getting murky and wild. On paper, Keith D's arrest might look like a slam dunk case. The man basically confessed multiple times. But not everyone's buying the story the prosecutors are selling. A whole crowd of people, including big names who were deep inside the Death Row Records era, are saying that this gang retaliation angle doesn't tell the full truth. Some even claim it's straight up false. And leading that chorus is none other than Marion Suge Knight himself. Yeah, Suge, the man who was literally right there when it all went down. He was sitting behind the wheel of that black BMW with Pac riding shotgun the night of the shooting. Suge caught shrapnel to the head but survived, making him one of the only living people who can still speak firsthand about what really happened on September 7th, 1996. Now here's where it gets crazy. What Suge has been saying from behind bars totally clashes with Keith D's version of events. When TMZ reached out to Suge after Keith's arrest to get his reaction, his answer shocked everybody. Think about that. Suge Knight, the man sitting next to Tupac when the shots fired, the man who lived through the chaos, the one who most people figured would be first in line demanding justice, he said he didn't want Keith D to be arrested. Yeah. The same guy who saw it all unfold is out here saying Keith shouldn't even be in handcuffs. That left everyone asking the same thing. Why? Why would Suge, of all people, not want the man accused of being tied to Tupac's death locked up? That question alone sent shockwaves through the hip-hop world, because if Suge's saying that, maybe there's a whole lot more to this story than anyone's been willing to admit. Now sure, some people think Suge Knight's response was just him trying to be diplomatic, maybe not wanting to see someone from his old neighborhood go down like that. But the streets, they've been whispering a whole different theory, and it's way darker. What if Suge doesn't want Keith D behind bars because deep down he knows Keith D wasn't the real one behind Tupac's death? What if this whole arrest is actually blocking the real truth from ever coming out? That's the talk running through barbershops, forums, and back channels all over. And it's not new. There's been a long-standing theory that takes this story way beyond gang retaliation. According to that version, both Tupac's and later Biggie's murders weren't street hits at all. They were inside jobs. Yeah, you heard that right. Orchestrated from inside Death Row Records itself. Not because of Crips and Bloods clashing, but because of something way more powerful. Money, power, and control. This claim has been floating for years. And it's not just random internet talk. Even people who were around during that era have hinted that there was more going on behind the scenes than anyone was saying out loud. The theory breaks down like this. By 1996, Tupac was becoming harder and harder for Death Row to control. He was bigger than ever. His influence was skyrocketing, and word was spreading that he planned to walk away from Death Row completely. Pac was talking about launching his own label, Machiavelli Records, and taking a chunk of Death Row's biggest artists with him. That kind of move would have shaken the whole industry. So according to this theory, people inside the label had a reason to keep Pac from leaving. A reason that had nothing to do with street revenge, and everything to do with protecting power and profits. There were heavy rumors swirling back then that Tupac was planning to audit Death Row's financial books. And if that was true, it would have been a straight-up disaster for certain powerful people inside the label. Word was Pac had started noticing strange money moves, missing funds, shady deals, numbers that didn't add up, and he was ready to expose it all. In this version of events, the infamous MGM beatdown of Orlando Anderson wasn't the reason Pac got killed, it was the perfect cover. A staged excuse to make the hit look like simple gang retaliation, when in reality, it might have been something cold, strategic, and deeply planned out. According to that theory, the fact that Keith D and his Southside Crip homies were out looking for Death Row affiliates that same night, the fact that they happened to have a gun ready, and the fact that they just so happened to roll up at the exact second Pac's car stopped at a red light, all of that feels way too perfect to be some random street coincidence. A lot of people believe Keith D and his crew were being played, manipulated into being right where someone else needed them to be, setting them up as pawns in a much bigger game. And really think about it. How would they even know Pac and Suge were headed to Club 662 that night? How could they know what route the BMW would take from the MGM Grand to the club? How did they end up pulling alongside Pac's car at that exact intersection, that exact moment, with the windows down and Pac exposed? Was that really all just chance? Or was someone feeding them inside information? Someone with enough power and reach to make sure the setup looked like a street hit while the real puppet masters stayed hidden behind the scenes? Everybody knew that Knight was building up to something, but then everything flipped in an instant. Something unexpected happened that threw a wrench in whatever plan might have been in motion. If there was a plan at all, it didn't play out the way anyone thought. Tupac and Suge Knight never even made it to Club 662. They got caught at that red light on Flamingo and Koval, and that's where it all went down. The moment was chaos, and the details come straight from Keith D's own mouth, described in his interviews and his book like he's reliving it step by step. But here's where Keith D gets real cautious with his words. He's admitted plenty that he was in the car, sitting in the front passenger seat, and that the shots came flying from the back seat. But when it comes to the biggest question of all, who actually pulled the trigger, he suddenly goes silent. He keeps it vague every single time. Was it his nephew Orlando? Was it his boy Big Dre? Keith never says. He dances around it, dodging the name like it's poison. And that's led a lot of people to believe his silence isn't random. They think he's protecting someone. Specifically, some say he's keeping quiet to protect his late nephew's name, Orlando Anderson, the same man who many believe was at the center of the storm. Whether it's loyalty, guilt, or strategy, nobody really knows. But that mystery keeps fueling the fire even decades later. Some people think Keith D might honestly not know who fired those fatal shots, that in the blur of chaos with the car speeding, adrenaline surging, and bullets flying, it all happened too fast to see clearly. Maybe he just couldn't tell which one of the two in the back seat, Orlando or Big Dre, was actually squeezing that trigger. But then there's another theory, and this one's got people really talking. Some believe Keith D does know exactly who pulled that trigger, but the truth would expose something way bigger than gang beef, something that could tear open secrets that powerful people have been burying for decades. If that's true, his silence isn't confusion, it's protection, maybe even survival. And that's what makes this whole case so powerful and so frustrating. It's not just about one murder, it's about the reckoning with one of hip-hop's darkest, most painful chapters. The mid-90s East Coast versus West Coast feud ripped through the culture. It broke friendships, fueled violence, and left scars that still haven't healed. Tupac and Biggie, two of the most iconic voices of their generation, were both murdered at the peak of their greatness. And here we are, 27 years later, still piecing together what really went down and why. Recent updates have made things even more tangled. According to court filings and new documents, there hasn't been any additional arrests directly tied to Tupac's murder beyond Keith D, but the story's far from over. His trial keeps getting pushed back, now delayed until February 2026, all because of new evidence and ongoing defense motions. The defense says they've got new witnesses ready to step up, people who can supposedly place Keith D somewhere else entirely at the time of the shooting. And if that turns out to be true, it would completely blow up the prosecution's case. If those witnesses check out, the entire narrative might collapse. And once again, we'd be right back where we started, with more questions than answers about one of hip-hop's biggest mysteries. And just when it seemed like this case couldn't get any messier, more drama hit the headlines. Keith D found himself facing new charges, this time a battery charge in January 2025 after allegedly getting into a fight behind bars. Prosecutors jumped on it fast, arguing it proved he's still a threat and shouldn't be released anytime soon. Meanwhile, his defense team kept firing back, dropping motion after motion to challenge the evidence. In October 2025, they even filed a suppression motion to block evidence from that 2023 police raid, claiming officers broke procedure when they searched his home. Even though that motion was eventually withdrawn, it raised serious eyebrows about whether some of the prosecution's so-called proof should even count in court. But then, the plot thickened even more, because here comes the Diddy angle. Keith D has made explosive claims in both his 2008 DEA interview and his 2019 book, saying that Sean Diddy Combs supposedly offered $1 million for a hit on Tupac and Suge Knight. Yeah, you heard that right, $1 million hit. Of course, Diddy's team has fired back hard, vehemently denying every bit of it. His lawyers have called the claims completely fabricated and even launched defamation suits to shut it down. Police have backed that up too, saying no solid evidence ever linked Diddy to Tupac's murder. He's never even been listed as a suspect. Still, the timing of these allegations popping back up, especially with Diddy now facing his own separate legal issues, has everyone talking again. It's like this case refuses to stay buried, each new headline adding another twist to the mystery that's haunted hip-hop for nearly 3 decades. And here's the truth, Keith D's arrest has opened way more questions than it's answered. If he's convicted, will that really mean justice for Tupac Shakur, or will it just mean another convenient fall guy took the blame while the real masterminds, whether from death row, law enforcement, or the music industry itself, continue to walk free? This case has become bigger than just one man. It's a mirror reflecting power, betrayal, and the price of truth in hip-hop's darkest hour. Thank you for watching. If you were caught up in this story and want more deep dives into hip-hop's most shocking mysteries, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment below. Let's talk about what you think really happened that night.